All right, let's go ahead and turn to some very disturbing and very scary developments out of Israel. So we can put this up on the screen. A strike in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights killed 12 kids and young adults who were playing soccer in that region in a Druze community. Israel and the U.S. are blaming Hezbollah for this attack and the killing of these children. Hezbollah is denying any sort of culpability here. In a sense, what actually happened really doesn't matter because Israel and the U.S. are certainly treating this as an attack perpetrated by Hezbollah in the, as I said before, Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. We could put this up on the screen. This is a very fast-moving story because now the question turns to, okay, what is Israel going to do in response? And Saagar, you pulled news just this morning that the Israeli Security Cabinet has authorized some sort of retaliation. We don't know what that looks like yet, but we do know that there is an incredible risk right now in this fraught moment because we've had these exchange of fire between the Israelis and Hezbollah for, since effectively the beginning of this latest war, and it has remained relatively contained. But now the Israelis are threatening massive retaliation. Iran is involving themselves as well. Of course, Israel is always wanting to drag us into some broader conflict and especially into some conflict with Iran. Reports are that U.S. and other Western diplomats are trying to get the Israelis to temper their response and avoid a massive escalation. But this is a very scary situation we're looking at right now.
Yeah, it is terrifying. I mean, it's also very sad here because we did have 12 kids or teenagers and others who were killed in the strike. Obviously, there's a lot of incentive both for Israel to claim it's Hezbollah and for Hezbollah to deny it's them. So at a certain sense, like you said, we're not necessarily going to know what's happened. But we do know that this is the nightmare scenario for a variety of reasons. Well, we have the Israeli War Cabinet and many other security officials, including Netanyahu, who have been wanting to take the war to Lebanon for quite a long time because it prolongs the war, which means it prolongs any sort of discussion of what happened on October 7th, conversation around that. So that's very much to their benefit. Well, then we also have the situation where the U.S. security establishment is one where they have to follow along but try to push back to the best of their abilities. Well, in this particular moment, it's very difficult when the Israelis can claim, perhaps with some credibility, I haven't looked exactly into the striker, whatever, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that a Hezbollah rocket killed 12 people in Israel. When they've been firing on, they've killed some civilians, IDF members, etc. The scariness really of the situation is that this is not Gaza. And we've tried to say this from the very beginning, is that Hezbollah is a real paramilitary organization with deadly rockets, with much more sophisticated technology, with tens of thousands of more fighters who are much more well-equipped, battle-tested throughout the entire Syrian civil war, and would put the IDF in a very difficult position. And if they're running low on munitions already, just bombing Gaza, good luck actually fighting a real paramilitary force. An actual, like, straight up, almost not peer military, but something that is significantly more equipped to deal with IDF, as we have seen through some various attacks and others that were able to penetrate the Iron Dome. So it's a very different military situation. It's one where the IDF would be seriously matched in its fighting capacity, and the potential for the blowout from there is just sky high. With Iran, with others, I mean, the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah is, like this. There have been reports now that the Israelis want to assassinate Hassan Nasrallah. The thing is that what people forget is even if Iran were not to get involved, then Lebanon would explode. There could be another civil war that happens there.
And Lebanon
who the hell knows how that comes
very rough shape now.
Lebanon. Lebanon's in rough shape for decades, but especially
economic basket case. We can put this up on the screen, which just sort of was a good summary of what has happened so far. So Joyce Karam says, Lebanon braces for Israeli response. There is fear that the Israelis would strike even in Beirut, which would obviously be, complete disaster. Hezbollah is evacuating sites in Lebanon. Pro-Iran groups are evacuating sites in Syria. Israel security meeting underway. Now that meeting has completed and they did authorize some sort of response. Here's the other thing. You have a number of nations telling their citizens to leave Lebanon. But the other context here is this is happening in the midst of these continuing ceasefire talks, which there are some indication that the Biden administration is really trying to push to wrap this thing up. I'm going to play for you Kamala Harris's comments after her meeting. And Bibi was in town last week, obviously, and she met with him, Biden met with him, Trump met with him, et cetera. In the piece that's linked there in that tweet, they write the escalation is taking place as the Mossad chief, the CIA chief, Qatari's prime minister, and the head of Egyptian intelligence are all meeting Sunday in Rome to continue talks on a potential deal between Israel and Hamas that would see the release of the hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza. And so while the U.S. wants this thing to be wrapped up, and they are trying to avoid an even broader escalation, which so far their original goal was let's not have it spread outside of Gaza at all. That obviously has completely failed. But now it's, hey, let's not have a broader conflagration. But you have to remember the Israeli politicians who are, totally in control here in the absence of our leadership. They have an interest in expanding the conflict. They have an interest in continuing this war and having justification to do so. So that's part of why this is such a scary situation, such a scary moment right now, and why we're all watching very closely what's going to unfold next. At the same time, we don't want to lose sight of the horrific attacks that continue to occur by the Israelis in Gaza. This was, just imagine for a moment if it was Russia doing what I'm about to show you, which is an IDF soldier planted explosives, detonated a water station that 1 million+ people depend on, put it out on Instagram, very proud of his actions. He says it's in honor of Shabbat. And also the soundtrack is, some song about destroying Gaza and how great that'll be. So take a look at this Instagram that was posted here. You can see, the water station. You can see the IDF soldiers there preparing the detonation. And then this is the water tank, the large facility. This is in Rafah, by the way. And here is the explosion blowing up this absolutely critical water infrastructure at a time when obviously Palestinians in Gaza are already starving, already struggling with a lack of clean drinking water. We now have reports that there's polio in the sewage in Gaza. IDF soldiers are being vaccinated, for polio to make sure that they don't contract it as well. It's just a disastrous situation. Ryan and Jeremy Scahill over at Dropsite News, they commissioned an article from the journalist who had discovered, this is Yunus Tarawi, who, I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter, you definitely should, but he has been finding a lot of these IDF TikToks, Instagrams, et cetera. And he wrote about this particular one. The headline here is the IDF just destroyed a key Rafah water facility that Rachel Corrie spent her last month of her life defending. He writes, on Friday, I discovered a video posted on Instagram by an Israeli soldier showing the calculated demolition of a chief water facility in Rafah. He goes on to say that U.S. human rights activist Rachel Corrie, who was crushed to death in 2003 by an Israeli military bulldozer while attempting to prevent demolitions in the city, spent much of her time during the last month of her life helping to protect this very facility, specifically the municipality workers who were at this very facility, because it was so critical. I referenced before the soundtrack that's in the background of that Instagram. He says the lyrics include things like, "We will burn Gaza, shake all of Gaza. For every house you destroy, we will destroy 10. And critically, Yunus also points out that this plan to starve and dehydrate residents of Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, this was announced early on in the war. Early on in October, an advisor to Yoav Gallant laid out this strategy in a radio interview. She said, Israel, as I understand, closed the water supply to Gaza, but there are many wells in Gaza which contain water which they treat locally, since originally they contain salt. If the energy shortage in Gaza makes it so that they stop pumping out water, that's good. Otherwise, we have to attack these water treatment plants in order to create a situation of thirst and hunger in Gaza, and I would say forewarn of an unprecedented economical and humanitarian crisis." Even her radio interviewer in Israel was kind of shocked by those comments, but lo and behold, a BBC analysis based on satellite data from May 9th found that 50% of Gaza's water and sanitation facilities have been damaged or destroyed since Israel began their offensive following the October 7th attack. So as I said before, Saagar, imagine if it was Russia. It should be condemned.
Genocide.
It should be condemned when it's Russia. If it's Russia doing this in Ukraine, and it should be condemned here. And yet we will hear nothing about it. And, it's also worth pointing out there continue to be horrific, deadly strikes by the Israelis in Gaza. And, it's nice to see people actually caring about children being killed as they are with these Druze children in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. I just wish that same care and concern was applied to all children, no matter their race, nationality, or geography of where they happen to live.
I think what I'm very worried about is the proxy fight, and as the continuing spillover effect of all of this, that we will get further away both from any sort of humanitarian solution, with the ceasefire and allowing aid into Gaza, but actually an expansion of the war, which there are millions of people who live in Syria and in Lebanon, not to mention Iran and everywhere else. There are also, always remember this, tens of thousands of U.S. service members who are sitting there, sitting ducks. And also, I'll bring it back to the domestic situation. This is where I am most terrified of Biden. His cooked brain is the one responsible for trying to keep us out of this. A real president needs to get his ass on a plane and get over there now and actually try and bring some sort of solution to this. Instead, we've got, like Blinken and Jake Sullivan, who got a great track record, right? Yeah. That they have on this. So I am terrified. Our vice president is here campaigning for her job. We've got the literal C- team who is running American foreign policy right now. I'm terrified. Yeah. This is where he needs to go tomorrow.
Well, he needs to go, and he needs to actually be willing to flex some American muscle with regards to this, because long overdue. And listen, if you're Bibi, the calculation was very clear. First of all, you've got an ally in Biden. You've got an even greater ally in Trump. So he clearly felt like, all right, if I can just run out the clock till November, Trump's going to destroy Biden. And so, I can do whatever I want then, and I won't get any pushback whatsoever, even like the little bit of hand-wringing that Joe Biden has done. So people were watching very closely what comments Kamala Harris would make coming out of her meeting last week with Bibi Netanyahu, reading the tea leaves of whether there's any chance she would be different at all from the Biden-Harris administration, given that, this is a woman, as I said before, it's really not clear that she actually has any core beliefs on anything. So trying to figure out where she's going to be is an art, and tea leaf reading and trying to figure out what the political calculation is going to be. She gave comments that the tone was definitely different from what Biden has said. This has been fairly consistent for her in the vice presidency, where she has sounded notes of much more empathy for Palestinians than Joe Biden has. Does that amount to any sort of policy shift? That is very much TBD. Let's take a listen to a little bit of what she had to say.
I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
So there you go. Like I said, different tone. Doesn't mean anything. Your guess is ultimately as good as mine. I guess the good indication is she's already said she's kicking out Sullivan, Blinken, and co.
Okay, she didn't say that. That was leaked to somebody who reported it. Do I believe that? Maybe.
Well, the fact that someone felt that it was a good thing to leak is, a positive sign. On the other hand, I don't think anyone should get their hopes up. She reaffirmed after this speech, because of course the Israelis freaked. Oh my God, how dare you even gesture at a criticism of us. Her office put out that, her position and Biden's position are the same and hasn't changed, et cetera, et cetera. So is there a shift coming in terms of policy here? Don't know.
Here's what I would say. Philip Gordon, I've known who he is for a while. He worked for Anthony Blinken whenever he was at the State Department under Obama. He was the assistant secretary. Did he write a book on the Middle East where he said Iraq was a mistake? Okay. I mean, that's just not, that's such a low bar for me. I don't think there's been a national security
He genuinely
advisor.
comes from, listen, like the question is, are we going to get the Biden bear hug strategy or are we going to get the Obama, like slightly better, like willing to, I mean, the Iranian nuclear deal, the Israelis genuinely, like that was a genuine rebuke of just, we're going to do whatever you want, whenever you want, et cetera. When he was on his way out, he allowed a resolution through the UN Security Council. Like, we're not talking about a total 180 here with regards to where Kamala Harris positions herself. The reason why I am cautiously optimistic we may get the Obama policy versus the Biden policy is just, number one, she just isn't ideological on this in the way that Biden has. And Biden has been so ideological as to be willing to damage his own political prospects. And it is my contention that if you are just doing, as Nancy Pelosi is, a naked analysis of the politics as they exist today, it would merit a different response here than what has been given, because it was quite clear the Gaza war was a drag on Biden. It was a disaster for him. It was a big part of the reason why, you know, young people, his numbers with young people were so terrible, and his numbers with actually, Black Americans have a much different view of this conflict typically than white Americans do, and it was dragging down his numbers with Black Americans as well. So that's, I'm not hopeful because I think she's courageous, they're gonna take us there, whatever. I just think the politics on this have shifted. I think Bibi's made himself a very partisan right-wing figure. And so if you're just responding to like the normal Democratic politician calculus at this point, I think it augurs more in the direction of an Obama-Israel foreign policy, which again is not amazing, but is somewhat better, versus a Biden-Israel foreign policy.
With that. I do. My only caution is on Ukraine, where I think they've totally lost it. But we'll save that for...
I think she's got the same view as Biden does, basically.
But that's worse, because it's unchecked from at least the guy who got us out of Afghanistan and at least waited to ship weapons as opposed to letting them into
all
NATO.
In now, so.
Well, there's more to go all in. Just wait. We're only half the pot so far. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.